I'd like to call this special council meeting to order. Before we proceed, I want to acknowledge that the land upon which we are located here is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe people, many of whom continue to occupy and live in our community and add to the richness of life here. Madam Clerk, the roll call.
All members of council are present, Your Worship, with the exception of Councillor Christensen.
I want to welcome the new councillors. This is the first official council meeting other than the inauguration that Councillors Lewis and Councillor Flagg are participating in, and Councillor Christensen may be here. She's run into some difficulties, but hopefully she'll be able to join us before the end of the meeting. There are no other announcements. There is no addendum to this special council meeting agenda. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? There being none, then Councillor Noyes, you have a yeah, Madam Clerk, we have correspondence. Don't see a resolution with respect to that. But I presume we're going to receive that. We're going to receive that. Yep. Councillor McDermott, would you move that we receive and support the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority Environmental Registry of Ontario posting? And can I have a seconder? Councillor Noyes? Are there any questions or comments with respect to that item of correspondence? If none, then I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Councillor Noyes, you then have the next resolution, which relates to moving into closed session.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Move it myself and seconded by Councillor Lewis that council will now hold a closed session meeting at 5:34 p.m. to consider the following. Pursuant to Section 239E of the Municipal Act 2001, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, regarding Ontario Land Tribunal Appeal 214 Windmill Point Road South.
So before we vote on this, I want to say that we've received a fair bit of communication with respect to this matter. I had anticipated that we might be able to deal with this matter without the benefit of our town solicitor being available. She's not available this evening, and Mr. CAO, did you indicate that she would be available or could provide comments on December the 5th?
Yes, that's my understanding. Should be available on December 5th.
So I'm suggesting that it might be appropriate for this matter to be deferred until December the 5th, in which case I'd need a mover and a seconder, Councillor Dubanow, Councillor McDermott, to defer this to December the 5th. Are there any questions or comments on that? Well, I guess there are no questions. It's a motion to defer. All those in favor? None opposed. That is carried. So on December the 5th, Councillor Noyes, you will have already moved that we go into closed session, so it'll be a matter of simply voting on it at that time. We won't need to come out of closed session. So then the next item on the agenda relates to the consideration of bylaws, and we have a couple of those. Councillor Lewis, you have the resolution relative to entry into a municipal transfer agreement with the Niagara Transit Commission.
Thank you, Your Worship. Resolution number 3, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott, that bylaw number 144/2002 to authorize the entry into a municipal transfer agreement between Niagara Transit Commission and the Corporation of the Town of Fort Erie hereby be given first and second reading.
All those in favor? None opposed. That is carried. So that bylaw is on the floor for any questions or comments before we go to third and final reading. If there are none, Councillor Flagg, you have the resolution for third and final reading of this bylaw.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Dubanow, that bylaw number 144/2022 is given third and final reading to be signed by the Mayor and Clerk under the corporate seal.
Are there any questions or comments? There being none, all those in favor? None opposed. That is carried. And Councillor McDermott, I understand you have the resolution for the first and second reading of the confirmatory bylaw?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Lewis, that bylaw number 145-2022 to confirm the actions of council at its special meeting held on November 21st, 2022 is given first and second reading.
All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Councillor Noyes. No, we go to Councillor Noyes, so you got to do third and final reading before we get to you, Councillor Dubanow. Hold your fire.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Lewis that bylaw number 145-2022 is given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and the clerk under the corporate seal.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. And Councillor Dubanow, now we get to you.
Yes, Your Worship. Some things never change. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Flagg, that council adjourns at 5:37 p.m. to reconvene into a regular meeting of council on December 12th, 2022.
All those in favor? That is unanimous. And so at this point, then, we're going to go into the council and committee meeting. And I'll call us all to order. Madam Clerk, the roll call, please.
All members of council are present, Your Worship, with the exception of Councillor Christensen.
There are no announcements, but there is an addendum, and that shows that one of the delegations has been deleted. That's Mary McClellan Papp. And there's been an addition, and that is Jeffrey Aldridge. So when we get to item 8.1a, we will presumably hear from Mr. Aldridge, and that will be by Zoom, Madam Clerk. Thank you. We've got some upcoming public meetings, a notice of which is given for an open house for a 40-week short-term rental land use study. That's Wednesday evening, November 23rd, 2022 at 6 p.m., and that is via video teleconference. To participate, you can send an email to Fahima Begum, Junior Community Planner, at fbegum@fortery.ca, or call 905-871-1600. She is at extension 2527 to register for the meeting. We also have a 2023 budget schedule, which starts with meeting number 1 on Wednesday, December the 7th. Capital budget and forecast and user fee analysis is budget meeting number 2 on Wednesday, January the 18th, 2023. Water and wastewater operating budget meeting number 3 on Wednesday, February the 15th, 2023. Library general levy operating budget and assessment analysis meeting number 4, and that's on Wednesday, February the 22nd, 2023, if required. All budget meetings begin at 6 p.m. Budget bylaw is scheduled for Monday, December 12th, 2022. Preliminary capital budget and user fees bylaw scheduled for January 23rd, 2023. Water and wastewater budget and rates bylaw, Monday, February 27th, 2023. General levy budget bylaw and general capital budget bylaw. Proposed zoning bylaw amendment, another public meeting with respect to 63 Idlewild Street. That will be on Monday, December the 5th, 2022, 6 p.m. here in the council chambers, and the information report for that will be available at 5 p.m. on November 30th, 2022. There are no public meetings this evening. There's really nothing on the consent agenda, so that would take us to Planning and Development Services, and that would take us then to Jeffrey Aldridge. Until such time as the chairs and vice chairs have been appointed, I will conduct the meeting, and then the next council and committee meeting, which is December the 5th, the chairs can be responsible for managing or conducting their portion of the meetings. So, Mr. Patton, do we have Jeffrey Aldridge available? Yes, please. Good evening, Mr. Aldridge.
Well, good evening.
So we can see you and we can hear you, so you are now on as soon as you're ready to go.
Thank you very much. I was thinking you were still on your 6 o'clock schedule, so I was just cooking dinner.
What's for dinner?
We're having pork tenderloin on the barbecue tonight.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes, actually,
then.
we did jump the gun a bit. Is that a problem, Madam Clerk? Yeah, we've already jumped the gun. We want to show how efficient we can be, Mr. Aldridge, so we're taking advantage of every minute.
Well, thank you very much for that. Okay, I'm ready to share my screen, am I?
If you're capable, for sure.
Yep, I hope I am. Okay, can you see my screen that says Bill 23?
No, but we can see something on your screen. It looks like your email. Yeah, it looks like your emails, which I'm sure you don't want us to be perusing.
No, okay, I'll stop the share and I'll go back to the other screen. And are we there now?
Not yet.
This is not behaving properly, is it?
There we go.
There we are. Well, thank you very much. Okay, well, good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'd like to welcome those of you who are returning. Welcome back. And for the new members, I welcome you. The reason for my, my presentation tonight was I've been watching Bill 23 and I was planning on doing a presentation in December. But then when I saw this was on the agenda for tonight, I moved that ahead. So I'm here to talk about Bill 23. And is my screen going to behave now? Yes. What I'm going to cover tonight, why am I here? What is Bill 23? What is the reason for Bill 23? Key points, the staff report, and conclusions and suggestions. My purpose tonight is on your agenda, you only have an item to receive the report from staff. I don't see a presentation that may go along with that. And I wanted to make sure that both council and the community is aware of what Bill 23 and gets involved with it. So I hope I'm not being presumptuous by taking the opportunity to present what I think Bill 23 is all about. Bill 23 is a large, far-reaching omnibus bill affecting many other acts. The main goal of this is to get more houses built by making it easier for developers. But they want to do this by having faster application approval, which means less public input, less municipal control, and more Ontario government control. It is all going to give financial incentives to the developers. The goal over the next 1.5 million years, as I understand it from the government, is to build 1.5 million homes in the next 10 years. Key points of the bill. I am not trying to cover all the points in it, just highlight some of them. The staff report that is part of your agenda tonight is excellent for saying what's in the bill. I've also included references at the end of my presentation. They're web links for people to go and look at other ways of looking at Bill 23. So the key point of Bill 23 is the reduced ability of the public to participate in the decisions regarding developers. The public will have fewer rights to appeal. We won't be able to appeal, I understand, official secondary plans, no third-party appeals. And of course, of interest to me is, as you know, I have done an appeal for the secondary plan. If this does go through, there's a good chance that my appeal will be squashed. They will not allow it to go forward. And anybody wanting to do this in the future would not be allowed to either. The Ontario Land Tribunal, which as I note already favors developers over 90% of the time, will have increased authority to dismiss cases, increased ability to charge costs to losing parties. The impact on the municipalities in the region. The Niagara Region is, I understand it, being removed as an authority to get involved with developing, replaced with authority in various Ontario ministries. There will be less parkland as a result of this, less development fees to the municipality to help support the cost of increased infrastructure. The clergy rule will be eliminated, which is what stops amendments being made for 2 years after a new law, a new official plan or secondary plan is introduced. And the authority of conservation departments is significantly reduced. Just a comment there about conservation. Premier Ford has already made it known that he plans to cut down on the Greenland and allow many more developments, which is in complete contradiction to what has been said by the Ontario government before. This is a quantity over quality bill. 1.5 million is to be added, mainly in the Golden Horseshoe. The Golden Horseshoe is already overloaded. If you've ever tried to drive across anywhere from, say, Hamilton, even as far as St. Catharines, all the way across Toronto, once you're in any sort of busy time, it takes hours and hours. We are already overloaded. Adding even more is not something I would be in favor of. We don't have enough hospitals. Hamilton Region is right now trying to fight the development and asking to get their hospital expedited instead. And there is a need for more schools and better education. This is developer friendly, not community friendly. There's less municipal control over development. The financial incentive is at the expense of the municipalities. It'll be interesting that houses might get built a little less expensive because of the incentives, but without the municipality getting the income from development fees, you're going to have to cover that somehow, which will probably result in higher taxes. Protected greenbelt development to be allowed. I mentioned that a minute ago. And other conservation authorities are diminished. The timing of Bill 23. This is a comment from your report. Commenting deadlines for the proposed amendments. Just a second, I have to move something out of the way here. I failed at that. Commenting deadlines for the proposed amendments to the Act. They have various deadlines, and commenting on the proposed changing of the Planning Act are due November 24th. That's just 3 days from now. That's why your report has to be submitted very quickly. The bill was introduced October 24th with a 30-day deadline. Is it a coincidence that the Ontario government introduced such a mammoth act during the change in municipal governments? It certainly does reduce your time to respond. The staff report, I think the staff has done a great job on this report. Their conclusion, which I'd like to point out, is there is no tangible evidence that the scope and scale of what is being proposed through Bill 23 will result in the goals of more and/or affordable homes built. The goal is to build 1.5 million homes, as I said. I looked up the average of the last 10 years. They're building about 70,000 homes a year. They're looking to double that rate of development. I made a note there, negotiating 101. Ask for a lot more than you really want. I wonder whether the government is looking to ask for 1.5 million homes and then say, okay, we've agreed to go down to 1 million. The goal of affordable homes. In the report, Bill 23, it identifies affordable as rents or purchases that are 80% of average purchase or rental price. This 80% will only benefit some of the middle income families. It does not address all people who can't afford but have smaller incomes. There are no goals for affordable homes. I tried to find an analysis somewhere of what the affordable home problem is, and I was not able to do it. It is a very strange problem. As a note here, here's a chart, a normal distribution of incomes. In the middle, you have the median family income is $97,000 odd. An affordable home is somewhere around the $87,000 home. You notice that all this affordable home process does is to increase the amount of ability to buy a home by that small green bar. With the median employment income being $37,200, all of that area in the yellow is not addressed by affordable homes. I think I'm running out of time. So my conclusion and my suggestion, as I said, I really like and appreciate the report staff has done. If there was any time to do so, I would love to see the comments in it strengthened. With the help of Regional Councillor Insinner and you, Mr. Mayor Redekop, I would love to see you work with the region to coordinate opposition and comments with all of the municipalities in the region and the other regions. Your report coming in from Fort Erie is a great start, but if it is a voice in the wilderness, it won't get the impact as if all the other municipalities and other regions contribute. I would also like to see this show up so that the public really gets involved and gets informed. I was wondering if there's a chance that this could get put up on Let's Talk Fort Erie. For anybody interested, there are 4 web links to various articles on Bill 23. 2 of them are from major law firms, and 2 of them deal with the fact that the Ontario Greenbelt is under attack by the Bill 23 and the plan to expand. Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you very much for allowing me to have a word with you tonight. I appreciate it, and I am finished.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aldridge. And in terms of some of your suggestions, I can advise you that the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, which represents all of the municipalities throughout the province, was not permitted to appear at the committee at Queen's Park that is actually hearing representations relative to Bill 23. So they've had to submit a brief, and the brief, I'm sure, is available on their website. So that's the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. You'd be interested, I'm sure, in reviewing that. And I think we can ask staff to post the report here by Mr. Miller. It's a very well-written, in-depth report that deals with all facets of Bill 23 and some suggestions going forward. So I think we can have that put on our website. Before I say anything further, are there any members of council that have any questions of Mr. Aldridge? Thank you very much, sir. And as you were speaking, it kept going through my head a comment made by one of the most famous presidents of the United States when he spoke of government of the people, by the people, for the people, and made me wonder how that squares with Bill 23, which I'm sure it doesn't. Thank you very much, Mr. Aldridge, and thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council.
That then takes us to the report relative to proposed provincial Bill 23. Can I have a mover? Councillor Dubanow. And Mr. Miller, I see you're here. Did you want to make any comments to us relative to the report, or are you focused mainly on responding to questions?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Hello to the new councillors. I think it's still a very live topic like this, and just maybe briefly from what was said by Mr. Aldridge, I do know that today in the legislature they're kicking around amendments, and I think the appeal one is coming back. So, you know, the report is written at this time into the cycle of reporting, and, you know, things are changing even today. So you take it for what it is, but we do need to, and it was correct in statement, our deadline for the 24th is we do want to make sure that we get our voices heard. I do know that the region and a few other municipalities did, and in fact, were raised in the legislature as well. Discussion was happening on the floor, so they're well aware. But I think the report stands for itself, and we'd like to make that submission.
Well, as I said, it's a very well-written report, and certainly appreciate the time and energy that you've put into this. I know that you've got a lot of experience in analysis of planning documents of this nature, and so I appreciate your work on this.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop, but I'm certain, as you're aware, there's been a host of people with specialized interests in each areas because it covers such a broad piece, so there's been a lot of help for this.
Great. Glad to hear that. Now, before you go, there may be members of council that have questions with respect to your report. So I just want to say that I agree with almost all of the comments that you've made here. I'm actually contemplating myself corresponding with the Minister of Municipal Affairs with respect to a little bit background on what is actually happening in some of the municipalities. The notion that some of these proposed changes will actually create better communities is, of course, not accurate. It's going to run contrary to a lot of the work that most municipalities have been trying to do to build better communities. And so one wonders what the cost of creating more homes actually will be. And I think you've really touched on some of the more important concerns that we have. The AMO submission to the committee also touches on a number of other what appear to be unintended consequences, or if they are intended, really makes one wonder why. So thank you very much for the report and the recommendations. If there are no questions, Councillor Noyes, you have a question now?
Yes, I'm not sure whether we're just asking Mr. Miller the questions or if we're going to be commenting on the report itself.
Well, you
Or if they're one
can,
and the
this
same.
report is on the floor. Mr. Miller is here. He can respond to questions, or you can make comments if you wish.
I'm not sure if Mr. Miller would have all this information, but I do have a number of comments, and perhaps he could weigh in on them if he does have some of the answers.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Miller. It was a really good report, very informative. Not one that I particularly wanted to see with all the changes, but one we're going to have to live with, I guess. The quota for the 1.5 million homes, do we know what their expectation is for individual municipalities? Like,
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Noyes. At this point, they're not giving us a number. As far as my understanding of what's happening is the region's plan, which was just approved by the province on November 4th, so I think this is all coordinated, to line up. The population projections that they were issuing to Fort Erie for the 2051 horizon are still going to be intact. And if Bill 23 goes through, basically the province is saying you'll take this regional plan as your own plan now. So the proportion of growth that was allocated through the land needs assessment at that time is still on the table for us here, as far as I know.
okay, and further to that then, would we, knowing the number of homes and knowing the new population number that we're aiming for, would we be in line then, or are we like I know because we don't have any specific numbers from the province. Do we feel confident that the numbers that we're working with are reasonable, and or that we're going to have, from the top down, someone saying, well, not 55,000, but now we want you to do 65,000. Do we have any idea what they may do down the line, or?
Through the mayor to Councillor Noyes, no. The quick answer is no. But I would say that what they've put out there and what they're saying is that Toronto and Ottawa will be the major focus of these bills, but that they have another, I believe there's 23 municipalities identified that are being asked to get into the pledge situation where their numbers of growth will be coming from their pledge to the province, who will work with them to try and ensure that they're hitting those numbers. I believe St. Catharines, Niagara Falls are two of those in Niagara. So at the moment, Fort Erie is still kind of on the sidelines of the focused places of intention. But these changes or proposed changes in the the acts and subsequently the regulations getting into our official plans, like the ADUs and things like that, those are province-wide stuff. So those will have impacts, and we need to assess those, and the whole development charge side of things is and, you know, just, there's so much information coming out right now, but AMO's, I read through AMO's information with the financial, Ontario Financial, one was, I think, today or circulated around as well, and they're all hitting on the same or similar points. So it's becoming a chorus, I think, of what we're hearing. The province has got to, I think, and they are, I think, listening to what they're hearing.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I do have more questions. In regards to the OLT awarding costs to the loser, to be perfect, you know, the way it's kind of written, have they given any thought, and I didn't see this in your report, any thought in regards to that this perhaps disenfranchises the lower income people? They don't have the ability, like, I think you mentioned it's a deterrent to people. And have they thought about like a litmus test in regards to financial ability to pay? Or, like, I mean, because if I was a low income and I was thinking, okay, they could charge me $10,000 or $50,000, I don't know what the typical cost for would be for a hearing and all the costs involved that may be given to me. I may not be able to think of, even though I think I'm right, I can't afford that. They may not agree with me. Whereas if I had $1 million a year and I could challenge everything and not worry about the cost, is there any thought to recommending that there be some guideline in regards to financial ability to pay before costs are allotted?
Through you, Mayor Redekop, to Councillor Noyes, I think the short answer to that is I think it's still within fully their discretion at the end of the day. The OLT hasn't been somebody who's traditionally been, even, you know, throughout their history of OMB, LPAT, OLT, have been somebody who've been awarding costs. It really needed to be blatantly vexatious in appeal, but it's always been something that's never really been happening, even though they've had that. But I think what they're doing with this bill is they're elevating its significance. They're not making it, if you lose, you pay. It's, they're, you know, so I'm, from that light, I'm thinking that they'll still, you know, use discretion as the appellant, but I think what they're trying to do is just simply say, listen, you better have planning merit to your appeals, because if you're just in here to delay development, it'll cost you. So that's, I think, the message that's going that way, is just have planning merit and not just doing this to slow or try and frustrate the system and process.
But further to that, but though, isn't there another layer before this, basically, that they will review the appeal, and if they think it's vexatious, they will dismiss it outright before any hearing? Like, don't they have that?
Through you, Mayor Redekop, to Councillor Noyes, yeah, the process of, you know, when you launch an appeal, there's submissions made to the boards, and they gather up the information, and then the sides will discuss case conference-wise, and there could be motions made by, you know, to the town. Somebody was in with just what we would consider a vexatious appeal, the town would likely seek to have that motion made to have that dismissed, and the board member, it still would, you know, work similarly. They just start elevating its the awareness and use of it. So.
Further to that, in regards to the wetland and the reevaluation of the wetlands, and I mean this in the nicest way, I do believe that wetlands are important and everything else, but I do know that there's certain areas that are designated wetlands that we as a council over years have kind of scratched our heads and said, why is this a wetland? We've given the reason, et cetera, et cetera. I'm thinking more along the Queen Elizabeth corridor and things, where a lot of land that we could use for industrial is designated wetland. Could this possibly free up some of those lands?
Through you, Mayor Redekop, to Councillor Noyes, the short answer is I'm not an environmental expert, so I don't know that I'm within my purview to be commenting on that. I do believe that what we're hearing is that, yes, you know, the evaluation system is no longer going to be relying on complexing, which is something that has typically been something that has expanded. You know, there's one here, and all of a sudden it's a giant, you know, preservation or wetland complex. But honestly, I don't know that I should make any comment on that because it is a rather specialized field that experts should be reviewing. And as far as the evaluations, the O's evaluation system changes, that's left to somebody with more experience.
Back and further, in the report, it talks about municipalities will be required to spend a minimum of 60% of the cash in lieu account of parkland reserves each year. Do you know what we spend now?
Through you, Mayor Redekop, I might be looking to Signe on this, so if you don't mind. Okay.
Good evening, Ms. Hanson.
Good evening. I have to get this. I know everyone laughs. Everyone laughs. Through you, Mayor Redekop, to Councillor Noyes, it really varies year by year how much we spend of parkland dedication and how much we spend with respect to development charges for parkland and recreation. We have two funding sources for parkland. Those are the two funding sources, DCs and cash in lieu of parkland. So it really depends on the projects which are eligible for DCs, which are not. Something that's not clear to us right now is how that requirement will be applied. We don't understand whether it's 60% of the parkland we've collected in a year or whether it's 60% of our parkland reserve right now. Right now, I think our parkland reserve is about 3.5 million, but we collect anywhere from $600,000 to $800,000 a year. So we're not quite sure how this is going to be applied. As Chris mentioned, we're receiving a lot of information in. Some of it is contradictory at this time with regards to that. So we're waiting to see what comes out in the next few months.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further, Councillor Noyes?
Yeah, further question in regards to exemptions and reductions for the rate of development charges on affordable housing, attainable housing, and purpose-built rental housing. I'm just wondering, does this pertain to all rentals or just affordable? And what is, I guess, purpose-built rental housing?
Sorry, Signe. Through Mayor Redekop to Councillor Noyes, the rental housing in ADU, which is the additional rental units, I understand to be development charge free. I think the purpose-built rental is rental beyond 5 units, or is it 10 units? I can't recall, but built for the sole purpose of rental as a definition. There are new definitions, and I'm still trying to understand a few of them as well. So, but the collection of affordable housing, attainable housing, and rental housing, ADU type stuff on development charges, is anticipated, and from what everything we've heard, will have a local impact as well as across the board, really. That's, you might seek confirmation or comment from either Jonathan or Kelly on development charge, or Alex, what their take on the situation is.
I don't know if they're going to comment now or later, but so I'm
Yeah,
just...
no, let's do that now. Mr. Jansen, do you have any comments on the development charges implications?
Through you to Councillor Noyes. Yeah, the report does comment on some of the general issues. We haven't been able to quantify at this stage all of the impacts of the mandatory exemptions. They will be quite significant for us. Thankfully, we're not impacted by some of the larger impacts that some other studies are being hit with regard to the phasing, the mandatory phasing in of rates, as our study was approved prior to that period. But certainly there's a number of impacts we'll begin to start estimating as the legislation is clear.
Mr. Hurlovitz, did you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, without actual figures, I can't really elaborate on what the impact is. Certainly, the situation is such that we're reversing the previous stand, which was development pays for development. And so if we are not collecting development charges on units, then the municipality is going to have to come up with that money from somewhere else.
Mr. Walsh, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Mr. Mayor, I didn't have a comment specifically on the development charges, but there is some issues with respect to implementation of multiple separate dwellings on one parcel that affect a number of our servicing bylaws.
And would affect capacity, I suppose, in terms of long-range planning.
Maybe, maybe not.
Councillor Noyes, back to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, I'm just trying to put this in, kind of like, get it straight in my own head here. So in other words, if I had a piece of property that was like 5 acres, and I decided I would wanted to build an apartment building, and not necessarily affordable, just attainable, I guess, but it's going to add to the rental numbers, then I wouldn't be paying any development charges for it, is that?
Well, if the purpose is for rental, Mr. Miller, is it clear?
Through Mayor Redekop to Councillor Noyes, to me, the wording is clear that rent are affordable or attainable or DC free. The attainable side of things, to me, might lean more towards ownership, but I'm not 100% clear on that.
Okay, so it's possible I could get a development charge fee, or I may not be. And do we know the number that they're using in regards to what is considered affordable? I think my recall of the definition is 30% of your income should go towards housing.
All right, that, through you, Mayor, to Councillor Noyes, that is still, I believe, the CMHC definition for affordable, but under this, there seems to be a shift where they're, taking sales as a number, as a guide. So it's unclear, and I don't know, to be quite honest, whether that 80% is specific to the 23 municipalities or if it's province-wide, to be quite honest. So there's some more investigation still to be done.
I'm getting close to the end of my questions.
That's good, because you're taking up more time than you're allotted.
Yeah, but we did start early, so.
That's to the benefit of all councillors, not just one.
Okay, the public meetings, I know, are no longer mandatory for these, but that doesn't mean that we can't continue to have them, as long as we can continue to meet the deadlines, the timelines for planning, right?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Noyes, that would be my understanding, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other councillor? Thank you, Councillor Noyes. I'm sure that you've covered a lot of territory that other councillors might have had questions on. Any other councillors? So you've covered it all. So actually, it turns out that you provided a service to all of us. So if there are no other questions or comments, then the recommendation is that this report be received by us and that it be forwarded to the Province of Ontario to be submitted, I presume, Mr. Miller, with the committee that's holding the hearings?
Through you, Mayor Redekop, the intent is to submit through the Environmental Registry of Ontario, so we will submit to the portal they opened up for receiving comments.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yarrow.
And hope that it'll be read.
We hope so.
Yeah, okay, great. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the recommendation? None opposed. That is carried. That then takes us to new business inquiries and the selection of chair and vice chair for the Planning and Development Services. Do I have, so we had discussed previously, but we do have to have a formal motion for someone to be appointed as the chair for the Planning and Development Services. Do I have a mover? Councillor McDermott? Would you like to move Councillor Dubanow? We can do the one. Yes, let's deal with the chair first, and then we'll go to vice chair.
So why would you just have me do both?
We can do both. Would
Okay.
you like to do?
Okay.
Would you like to do Councillor Dubanow? Do you have something in front of you that you wanted to
Well,
move?
I just have the new business, it's under new
Yeah,
business
yeah.
requirements.
Yep.
Moved by myself that the recommendation that council appoints the following chair and vice chair to the Planning and Development Services Business Subdivision of Council and Committee for the period of November 21st, 2022 to March 14, 2024. Councillor Dubanow, Chair. Councillor Christensen, Vice Chair.
Right. Any questions or comments? All those in... Of course. Of course. There's no additional pay, so it's not a pecuniary matter. All those in favor? That is carried. That takes us to the business status report. Are there any inquiries about the business status report? I note that, Mr. Hurlovitz, there's a number of tentatives with respect to the December 5th meeting. If they're not dealt with on December the 5th, would it be the intention to try to get them on the 12th?
We may have to move those to the January meeting.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions with respect to the business status report? There being none, that completes planning and development services. That takes us to infrastructure services. There are no presentations or delegations, no reports. And can I have a mover for the recommendation under new business inquiries with respect to the selection of the chair and vice chair, Councillor Dubanow? Are there any questions or comments on that? And I'm presuming that Councillor Noyes, you will accept the chair's position, and Councillor Lewis, you will be the vice chair?
Back again.
Perfect. It's scary. We were talking about deja vu and how scary it can be. Seems to me that you were on infrastructure services back in the day as well.
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay. Pardon?
They had roads?
We had roads. We even had some sidewalks. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? That is carried. We have a business status report, and I think there's not much on that business status report. Yes, no forecasted reports at this time. Mr. Walsh, we're expecting that you will get to work and fill up this chart. That takes us, that concludes infrastructure services and then takes us to corporate services, and there are no presentations and delegations, but there is a report with respect to the annual accessibility status report. And I see that Ms. Bradnam is here. She is the staff member who takes responsibility for accessibility issues and does a fine job, and this is an excellent report. Can we have a mover for that report? Councillor Lewis. Are there any questions or comments? As I said, Ms. Bradnam is here if anyone has any questions. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. I just wanted to recognize all the accomplishments. I think when you read this report, I think we, and I'll say compared to none, we really stand out in regards to what we accomplished. We have an absolutely wonderful accessibility committee, and everything from the beach mats that I think we were introduced two years ago, I think we introduced them. We now have requests for even more at other locations because they work so well, and everything from the pool lift recently at the Freeland Center for the Pool, and we have such a very active committee that we're really looking for it, and I think the community and the businesses have really embraced the input from the accessibility. They have done things, they've gone above and beyond many times what the requirement is, simply because we've asked. We ask very nicely, and we provide all the help that we can and information we can, and the rationale why this would be better for their businesses. But I would say we're probably getting about 80% compliance when we ask. It might take a few years, it may take a few asks, but we do get them on side, and we do see changes that I think if we didn't push for it or ask for it, we wouldn't. And now the community itself is really recognizing us. I get several calls now on an accessibility issue, and it could just be a mother with their baby in the carriage and things like that. But and I think at the inauguration we talked about, I think Dennis mentioned about the doors, the automatic opening doors, as opposed to the things you have to hit with the hockey stick to open it when you're getting through the doors, and how helpful they are. The other thing I wanted to recognize that our chair, Dennis, has been appointed to a number of different committees, simply, I think, number one, because he's really great at it, but also because our community, our accessibility group has really shone. I think we're held up as the benchmark that you should try to achieve what Fort Erie has achieved. At least that's the feeling I'm getting when I hear some of the other municipalities and things. I am looking forward to it again at AMO this year. But again, Dennis, I think, has been been awarded some awards, but also he's on the regional committee, and I think he also has been afforded on AMO to sit on the accessibility provincial thing. So that's a huge feather in our cap because there are, 300 and something municipalities, they all have to have an accessibility plan, and it's our chair that's asked to sit on these committees. So I think it's a huge plus for us, and we could not do it without Ms. Bradman's help. She's been wonderful, and I hope you, when you see all the things we've accomplished in a year, it's because of the staff and the committee working so well together, and the community buying into what we're trying to convince them of. Thank you.
Yeah, well said, Councillor Noyes. Absolutely bang on. It's a great collaboration between the staff, the committee, the council, and the residents and businesses. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Flagg. Boy, I haven't said that before.
That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Flagg. Yeah.
Do we have a draft?
Yeah, nothing else. I just wanted to hear my name. Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the chair, I see that in the comments, the relevant departments, the AC is composed of 8 members of the public and a representative of the transit provider. With the fact that in an earlier meeting we had approved that the region will take over our regional transit, have we approached the regional transit provider to sit on this committee?
So right now, the region is still contracting with the current transit provider in Fort Erie, so that will continue at least till the end of 2023. And as we approach the end of 2023 and find out whether that contract will be extended, we can certainly make determination as to whether it would be necessary to reach out to the region. But it's extremely important to have someone from the transit provider involved in this committee. Ms. Bradnam, is there anything that you would want to add on that, or
Yeah. Through your mayor to Councillor Flagg, welcome. Ashley from On Demand is on our committee now, and she's also been chosen to be part of the regional advisory group, and she has asked actually at our last meeting if she could continue with the town until such time as council makes a decision on that. She loves participating on the committee, and she's been very helpful on answering some questions, especially for the Stevensville, Black Creek area and other areas as well. So she's asked she's committed to stay on for at least another year.
Good, that's great. Councillor Flagg?
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If none, then all those in favor of the report? None opposed? That is carried. The next item is the Land Committee minutes of October the 20th, 2022. Can I have a mover? Councillor McDermott? Any questions or comments with respect to that report or those recommendations? If not, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. I'm sorry, Councillor Noyes, did you have your hand up for a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention in the land committee, they talked about the elevator at the arena. And I understand from talking to Mr. Walsh that no? Okay. I'd like some information on the elevator that is in need of repair. I'll put it that way, just in case I misunderstood.
Okay, and that's something that you had raised with Mr. Walsh before?
Correct. So, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Noyes and I had a discussion earlier today on it. I was under the assumption that the elevator that has been out of service for 20-plus years, excuse me, would be repaired. After speaking with Mr. Hutton, our manager of facilities, he has indicated that with the blessing of our accessibility committee, that will not be repaired.
So, okay, so that won't be required for the use by this particular tenant?
They do not require it.
Yeah.
But that precludes the upstairs at Crystal Ridge from being fully accessible.
Okay, back to you, Councillor Noyes.
I'm just wondering how this falls in with the AODA standards, though.
Well, maybe Ms. Bradnam can help us with that, if she knows.
So because it's been plus 20 years, there is no requirement under the AODA unless we're offering it as public space. And in this case, Sean has met with the theater company, and they've made alternate arrangements if they do have somebody that does have a disability to do it actually at Crystal Ridge Community Center. So if they do get that request, they have alternate things available. In a perfect world, we'd fix the elevator and it would be great to have that, but because of the costs and the age of it, I understand that sometimes there's that duty to accommodate and the cost outweighs, and so they've made alternate arrangements if they do have a child that has a disability that can't access the stairs.
Thank you for that information. So, and then I'm to then, should I be making the assumption that since it's been broken in disrepair for 20 years, there's no plans in the future of making it operational?
Well, I suppose unless there was some funding source, so, maybe a depending on the use of that upper floor. I mean, at one time that was quite actively used for a variety of meetings. I can remember being up there, but it hasn't been in use for some lengthy period of time. So, this could be an opportunity perhaps for a service club maybe to provide some assistance if we get into that. But right now, I'm assuming, Mr. Walsh, I'm assuming that there is no intention right now to be repairing that elevator? Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop, and I understand the cost and everything, but I'm trying to recall some discussion we had with some community groups in Crystal Beach particularly, and we were suggesting that this arena and the unused space be considered as a potential meeting place, an option. So obviously that can't be.
Well, it can't be, and there are, there's the library, there is the Crystal Ridge Center itself. So that there are alternate spaces. I don't think we've been made aware of the fact that there's a need for an additional space up there. And if it came to, I suppose, incurring the cost of replacing the elevator, this might not be a space that's available for anyone. Here, at least, there's an organization that can use it, and as Bradman mentioned, if there's a need for accessibility, then there are alternate arrangements that have been made.
I understand that. I just know that in prior conversations, I know with the Advancing Crystal Beach, we kind of pointed out that the arena might be an option, and obviously it's not. But there are several other places that they could use. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? So I'm going to call the question again. This time it counts. All those in favor? None opposed? That is carried. And then the final report on our agenda is the third quarter financial report. Can I have a mover for that? Councillor Dubanow. So that report is on the floor, and again, I thought the report was very well done, Mr. Jansen, so would you please pass that on to Ms. Bovan? Any questions or comments with respect to the report or the recommendations? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. And I did have an opportunity of talking to Mr. Jansen earlier today about the Fort Erie, the SS, the stage and the theater that we contribute to. And I just wondered if he could weigh in on how much money we've put towards it, and just so that I think it was a substantial amount that the town did put forward to support it, and also what in the report it does talk about what we're doing with the outstanding amount and I think it might be good for Mr. Jansen to comment on that.
Yeah, and you might also comment, Mr. Jansen, on the school board's contribution to that theater as well. But please, if you could respond to Councillor Noyes.
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Noyes. Yes, we were able to finalize what remained of the amounts owing to the school board for the town's contribution to the theater. Those remaining amounts, the $869,000, are proposed to be transferred to the Niagara South Hospital Reserve. So the town made a commitment way back in 2013 or 14 or so to contribute towards that project. Those funds are not yet due, and we're making annual progress towards that. So it's our recommendation that we use those remaining reserve funds to get the town closer to that commitment for the hospital. And the hope with that as well is that we'll reduce some of the total amount owing or contributed annually through the town's budget as well in the next number of years. In terms of the total amount, the town's portion was capped at $1.5 million. The town did make a payment already a few years ago after some of the initial reporting was received, and set aside additional amounts in the reserves. So the final amount paid to the school board was around $724,000.
Councillor Noyes?
Well, thank you for that. I think it's money well spent.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Jansen, I note that the suggestion is that the money that we had allocated in the 2022 budget for climate change studies, which has about $150,000 left in that fund, should be transferred to the general levy rate stabilization reserve. Is there any reason why we wouldn't put that into a dedicated climate change reserve fund to make sure that A, those funds do go to climate change initiatives, and B, the public is fully aware that we take climate change seriously in terms of how we expend money in order to deal with issues that arise. And in this community, there are some fairly significant climate change impacts.
Yes, the transfer was proposed to a general fund, knowing that the funds were identified publicly in this report, and so that there would be a good way for us to track the use of those funds and carry them forward to future needs. We do try to minimize the number of reserves we have for specific purposes for the town. That can grow quite easily, and in fact, part of what this report is doing is trying to close a few reserves. So we have identified it and are supportive of that coming forward with future needs, and I know there's a couple needs that have been identified for that already. So while you could create a specific reserve for that, we believe that we can be tracked and accommodated through the existing general levy reserve.
So you're closing out, if these recommendations are accepted, there are 4 reserve funds that are being closed out. So that does address your concern about having too many of these specifically dedicated reserve funds, but there's still then the optics aspect of this relative to the public and their view of how we regard climate change as a council. So I guess I'm wondering whether there's any councillor that might be interested in moving that we apply this to a specific climate change reserve fund. Councillor Dubanow. So that's on the floor. Are there any questions or comments about that? So that would be an amendment to this second recommendation. All those in favor? Of course, sorry.
Is there a need to, can you just remove this completely?
No, we have to, because we're getting near the end of the 2022 fiscal year, we have to account for these funds somehow. So if they're not expended, they have to go somewhere. So they need to be put into a reserve somewhere for accounting purposes. I believe, is that correct, Mr. Jansen?
They're currently in the...
They were budgeted. They're sitting in our operating reserve, or our operating funds, and so now they have to go someplace.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All those in favor of the amendment? None opposed, that is carried. Are there any other questions or comments with respect to this report? If not, I'm going to call the question on report CS 18-2022 as amended. All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. That takes us to new business inquiries. Can I have a mover for the resolution regarding selection of chair and vice chair? Councillor Lewis? Is that your hand going up? Yep. Okay. Okay. Around here, it's like eating at the table when there's a large family. You get your hand up fast. Okay. So the resolution is that council would appoint Councillor McDermott as the chair of corporate services and Councillor Flagg as the vice chair. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed. That is carried. That would then, I guess, Madam Clerk, it would be appropriate for me to be asking councillors if there's any other new business or inquiries that they have. And I missed that on all of these in my urge to show the current council how efficient we can be. Okay, Councillor Dubanow, we're going to do that. And if anybody else had an item that they wanted to raise under the other two, we can go back to that. Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And I just wanted to quickly comment. I guess this should have been done under IS, now, or pardon me, infrastructure services now that I think about it, but corporate kind of ties into it as well. I just want to extend my appreciation, of course, to the roads team for the work they did getting us dug out during the snowstorm that we had this past weekend. You know, it's always a little frustrating when the snow is falling and you can't get out of your driveway that, you know, you wish it was cleared out yesterday. But having experienced what snow removal is like in other municipalities, I think we do a top-notch job here in Fort Erie. And as I said to Mr. Stojanovic, when I had sent him an email the other day, we'll be getting back down to business here in Fort Erie while some other municipalities may be still trying to figure out what to do. And that's something that I'm always thankful for and actually very proud of here in Fort Erie, that we don't get snowed in very often unless it's a very major situation. I did want to make one comment, though, Your Worship, about the Santa Claus Parade, which unfortunately was canceled this past weekend. I happen to know, and this goes back to some of the negativity which the newspaper had mentioned. I happen to know the organizers of that event and happened to speak with one of them. You know, they put in 300 hours a year in volunteer work. These are unpaid positions. These are individuals who do these things for our community because they want to make our community a better place and do something for our kids. So when I see the negativity and when I see the anger towards volunteers who are doing this out of the goodness of their heart, the anger and the negativity was wholly unwarranted. I was very upset to see that. And it was pretty obvious when you woke up Saturday morning how much snow that we had fall overnight, at least at my end of town, that was a smart decision and it would not have been safe or practical to be able to do the parade. And I think they made a smart choice. They had my support. And I just want to say, Your Worship, that I've always been thankful for the work they do. I know we'll have another parade next year. I'm looking forward to my kids being out to it, walking in it again like I did last year. And let's just remember that these are volunteers and these individuals do these things to make our community a nicer place. They aren't asking for anything in return other than for us to enjoy ourselves and be happy. And let's always remember that anytime something like this happens, Your Worship. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for those comments, and I'm sure that the harshest critics will be volunteering to help with next year's Santa Claus Parade, so perhaps the current organizers will be able to take advantage of that. However, the good news is, I did check with Santa Claus, and all the parents and all the children should be assured that Santa will be coming to Fort Erie on December the 24th. It doesn't matter how much snow there is, he's going to be here. Yes, are there any other items of new business? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you. I'm not sure which one this falls under. It's in regards to the Lincoln County Humane Society. There is a meeting that I'm going to tomorrow. But one of the things I'm asked to do is present a councillor's brief on what's going on. So if anyone ever has any questions that you'd like me to forward or ask at the meeting, I'd be more than happy to bring it forward. I have two questions that I'm going to ask because I'm not sure what the answers are, and I'm sure I'll get the answers tomorrow night. One, is there any place in town to physically obtain the tags?
Two places. Ruffins on Concession Road.
Okay, to physically obtain, not just order them? Okay, that's what I thought, Ruffins.
And Thor's on Dominion, but as I understand it, there's a kiosk that you attend, and the staff at either one of those stores will assist. So you can get your license in town. After you've put in whatever information you have to put in, I understand that you get some type of receipt, and then eventually you get the tag in the mail.
Okay, yes, and that's what I meant, physically obtaining the tag, like in town. There's no one's going to hand you a tag in town. You have to go through one of the kiosks or order it online, right? There is no,
Right.
But in one of the emails, I don't know if I'm sure all the council, was it that there's an additional charge to
Well,
that? And I'm not quite sure what they're talking about.
That's a question, yeah, so I don't know, and I'd raise this, and Mr. McQueen, if you could have someone clarify what the cost of a license was prior to the contract, animal control contract being changed, what the cost is now, and what the cost is with whatever the online charge might be, so that that's clear. what it is, and that was, I presume, what your questions are directed at.
Yes, because I wasn't aware that the cost had changed and that ordering it online, there may be a cost added to the actual cost of the tags. And if there is, I think that's something we as council should look at.
Well, it's the cost of a license, isn't it? It's part of the cost of a license, just like anything you do online. And the problem is that since the pandemic began, much of what occurs now is done online. You can't help it, at least with the kiosk and the staff at either of those stores helping people. If they're not particularly computer literate, this does assist them. And so I think I'd like to get the information as to what the cost was before, what the cost is now, and what the impact is of a online fee.
Thank you. I'm going to the meeting tomorrow, and any information or whatever that any councillors should have. I think there was an excellent write-up in the Observer in regards to the Lincoln County, and I also noticed that in its in our not Let's Talk Fort Erie, but in the magazine that we've put out. The Lincoln County is now in there as the provider of service too, with contact information. The magazine that we've put out, I can't remember the name of it. So it's good that they're, it's getting some legs, so that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. And since we're on that point, I just want to assure the public, because I still hear it periodically stated, that the Fort Erie SPCA is still in business. It's still in operation. It's still, it has a functioning board, at least from what I was advised by the executive director or the manager. And they're also attending public events to help to raise the profile of the organization, and they're also soliciting donations. So the Fort Erie SPCA is still operating. It just doesn't have currently the animal control contract. Any other questions or inquiries? Mr. Walsh, I did want to, and I meant to raise it during infrastructure services, and Councillor Dubanow did raise about the snow clearance. It was a large storm, and I had an opportunity to travel throughout much of the community and saw that there was really quite excellent work done through most of the community. There was an area where there were some problems, I understand it, but my understanding, and so please pass on as well my appreciation to the staff and the contractors. My understanding is, though, that you and your staff do a debriefing after this type of event, just to find out how things went and whether there were any areas that needed to be addressed going forward.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
I would suggest that when the Infrastructure Services Business Subcommittee meets, that perhaps that's something that could be on the agenda as well, so that those members of council can be made aware of what came out of the debriefing and what steps, if any, staff recommend going forward.
Certainly we can add that. We did have our debrief this afternoon between key staff. If you'll give me a moment of indulgence, I'd just like to cover a couple of points out of our debriefing.
Sure.
So we had almost 2 full days of near continuous snow commencing Thursday evening, depending on where you were in town. We got anywhere from 40 to 60 centimeters. Since that, it's been followed by 2 days of significant drifting due to the winds, which is almost just as hard to control as the snow itself. The town expended approximately 600 person hours on staffing and controlling this storm. That doesn't include our contracted hours. We did have some hiccups through this storm. We had 2 areas in particular where we had contracted equipment breakdown. It did delay the plowing in that area by a few hours, notwithstanding that we still met our legislative and council-approved levels of service on that, so that's the good news. And just a reminder to anybody that's listening online and our councillors, it's much easier if they call our 871-1600 line any time of the day, 24/7, to sort of cut out the middleman, which is council and myself and Mr. McQueen. It will bring attention to areas that a resident feels needs action much faster than the steps involved between everybody in this room. So.
I would suggest as well that we get that up on our website. I'm sure it already is in our social media to make sure that, particularly before the next anticipated snowstorm, so that the public is aware of that and can take advantage of that. Thank you very much, Mr. Walsh. I did neglect to mention at the outset, and I had actually intended to speak to the clerk about this earlier today, but I was notified by Councillors Lewis and Noyes that former Councillor Richard Berry had passed away on the weekend. And he served this community for, I believe, 9 years. I believe it was 3 terms. It might have been 4. Might have been 4 terms. And of course, Councillor Lewis and Councillor Noyes and I served on a number of councils with Councillor Berry. And so I had meant to ask the clerk to lower the flag to half-mast for 2 days. I'm not sure when the funeral would be, but I would think until former Councillor Berry's funeral. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. And I grew up with Richard Berry, and Richard Berry and I had some interesting times, interesting experiences, and the one thing I always remember is that he had a good sense of humor, and we could laugh at things even when we violently disagreed on something, and that did happen, but he had a sense of humor, and that's what I will remember about Richard Berry. I want to retain the good memories. So thank you, Councillor Lewis, for reminding me of that tonight. Are there any other items of new business or inquiries? If not, scheduling of meetings. Councillor Noyes, you've already mentioned that tomorrow evening is a Lincoln County Humane Society meeting. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, that would be at 6 o'clock. It's going to be at the Thorold, their new place. Also, there's an accessibility committee meeting on November 29th at 4 p.m. There's another accessibility committee meeting on December 6th at 5 p.m. And there's a seniors advisory committee meeting on December 7th at 10. And that will be at the Lions Center.
Any other meetings that anyone wishes to announce? The regional municipality of Niagara is holding its inauguration on Thursday, November the 24th, and that is at 5 p.m. At 10 a.m., there was supposed to be the traditional selection of the regional chair, but the provincial government took that matter out of our hands. You might recall that in 2018, into the election, the government decided to cancel the direct election of the regional chair by the public of Niagara, so that we are becoming progressively, in reference to Mr. Aldridge's comments, progressively less democratic in some of these matters, which is troubling and we should all be concerned about. Councillor Christensen, I noticed that you came in to the meeting a little earlier on. I'm sorry, I've been bypassing you. I don't know whether you had any items of new business or inquiries that you wanted to make.
Not this evening, Your Worship. I have not been particularly well for the last week, so I'm glad I got here.
I'm glad that you joined us as well. You do look a little peaked, so the good news is that I'm going to be going now to Councillor Dubanow to do his traditional role, which is to adjourn the meeting.
Yes, Your Worship. It's now over 2 terms, too. That's pretty cool. I'd like to move that council and committee adjourn at 6:50 p.m. this evening, Your Worship.
All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Lewis wants to stay longer, and you have my blessing. You can stay as long as you wish. Thank you all.